Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Welcome, one and all across the fantasy universe. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. I'm your boy, Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by Pro Football Focus and Establish the Run analyst, Dwain McFarland. It's the hustle, baby. It's week 4. It's in the books. Yeah, on to week 5. Dwain, I can't believe it. Week 5, we're already 25% through these NFL teams' seasons. It's crazy. We've got players out there who are 0-4. Maybe they're 1-3. They're panicking. They don't know what to do. They got Kenyon Drake on their team. He's wetting the bed. Julio Jones can't finish a game. Take a breath, folks. Relax. Maybe do one of these. And just hang out with Duane and I for the next hour. We're going to get you going.
Drake tonight, so
Dwayne's even got a PBR tall boy. Let's hear this one.
I already popped it. You got to tell me to hold on for sound effects.
So welcome in, everybody. It is the hustle.
My Topo Chico.
Oh, here you go.
Yeah, that was sorry. Sorry, that was terrible.
So what we're going to do here, folks, is we're going to talk a little bit about some folks to pick up off the waiver wire. We know everyone's into that. And we're going to go team by team, kind of alphabetically. And I'm going to hit on if there's anybody on those teams you should be looking to pick up. We're going to have a little nugget from Duane. Boom, we're on to the next team. Just know this week the Packers and the Lions are on bye. Packers, Lions on bye in week 5. So I know everyone's excited about Robert Tonyan, but he is on bye this week. So let me hit you first with this, Duane. You're 0-4. You're 1-3. I'm 1-3 in my big home league I always talk about here on the show, but I like my team. I like my roster. What's your advice to somebody who's in that predicament right now and they're listening to the show?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is, we've talked about this in the past on the show, is typically about every 3 to 4 weeks, a lot of things just start to turn over, and it's because the way that opposing defenses approach, the game. And so typically they're looking at 3 to 4 weeks worth of film. If you're the Cowboys, you're not looking at any film as a defensive coordinator. Apparently neither do the Falcons. But outside of those two teams, everyone else is typically studying the last 3 to 4 weeks. And so, the way that teams play, the opposing offense changes. So, for example, I would expect Robbie Anderson to start to see more coverage. Whereas to start the season, they were probably giving more attention to DJ Moore and very early on, even Curtis Samuel, right? And then now people are going to realize they're going to be like, oh, they're going to wake up. That's where like fantasy owners sometimes are like actually ahead, right? We jump on guys like right away. We're like, oh, Robbie Anderson might be great. We're going to own for week 2. Defenses, in the NFL, while I'm not saying they don't pay attention to that at all, you'll typically see that the trends start to bend. And so what happens is you have players that have broken out that now they're going to be tested in a new way. You're going to have to figure out, can you actually still continue to perform as defenses give you more attention? And if your teammates then break out, then in 4 weeks, you can see the same kind of thing happen. And that's why you'll see, these kind of, these up trends for certain guys, and then they'll kind of, and they don't always bottom way out, but they'll kind of dip back down, and then you'll see them go up again. Now, some of it is just random. Some of it is just tied to, who your opponents happen to be. But I say all of that because, first of all, we're still early in the season. So we still, there's a lot that still can happen. October's here, Drake, November's coming, the winds of change are blowing. And people are, the other thing to remember is a lot of other folks in your league, maybe you started off with multiple injuries. Well, injuries are catching up with everyone. I mean, we had another rash of them this past weekend. I don't ever remember a season like this with so many players impacted. So be patient, continue to work the wire. We can even talk about trade scenarios, wherever we want to take it tonight, but, just, keep going at it, man. Never give up, because with the way that the season's going, between, what's going to happen as defenses adapt and as you start to get players back, other teams lose players, I saw it this weekend with some of my best teams. I have teams that, were all 3-0, destroying it all first 3 weeks straight. Well, who do they have on them? They have Kamara, they have Calvin Ridley, they've got,
don't say that name. Don't say that name after last night.
Yeah. But anyway, it's like those kind of guys. And then, Kamara was still okay this weekend, but then you saw what happened last night with Calvin Ridley. And that's the kind of thing, right? So all of a sudden, Julio Jones leaves the game. Guess what? Other teams have 3 weeks worth of film. What did the Packers do? They decided we're taking Calvin Ridley away. And then you have this issue with Ryan, that he's a system quarterback. If you're not wide open, if it doesn't work exactly the way he thinks it doesn't look exactly the way it should look, at least until he's really far behind, he's just going to continue to check it down and take the guy that he thinks truly open. And that's nothing against, Matt Ryan. That's just the way that offense works. So when that happens, that hurts Calvin Ridley. So that's a great example of it. So the best advice is, to keep grinding. Injuries are catching up elsewhere if that's how you started off. If you're the one taking on an injury now, hopefully you built up a little bit of a lead, and we can talk you through some of the things you can do to help, retain that lead until you get, say a Nick Chubb or Austin Eckler or Julio Jones, whoever it may be, until you get them back for your lineup.
We appreciate all the guys in the chat room. If you're not live with us right now on YouTube, you should be. We're here every Tuesday night, usually about 9. Come hop in. You can find us at the Fantasy Football Hustle. Hit that subscribe button, and you'll be notified every time we're going live. We appreciate if you do. So if you're in that situation, I agree with Duane. Grinding waivers is the ultimate way to get back into this, because you don't know 2 weeks from now, all of a sudden an injury happens. And if you're just asleep at the wheel, you might not have that handcuff back. You might not have Joshua Kelly sitting on your bench, or a Cam Akers collecting dust, or a Damian Harris, who we're going to talk about tonight. But if you're still grinding, these guys now become integral parts of your lineup. So let's get to the waivers right now. Off the top, just a couple of names, Duane, at the running back position that you think people should be prioritizing tonight.
Yeah, a guy that we've already been talking about all season, but, he could be on your wire, is Joshua Kelly. A lot of you drafted him if you were listening to our draft plan show, but for whatever reason, maybe you did have to drop him because of something that happened last week, for example, with, Pittsburgh and Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Weird stuff's happening, this season. So if that was the case, he's a guy that's worth 15 to 30%. I would really push towards the 30%. Austin Eckler, is going to be out for a bit. He's got a grade 2 hamstring injury. And the thing is, Kelly was already leading the way. Justin Jackson is going to be involved, though. So I wrote about this in the utilization report on Pro Football Focus and established the run today. So you can see more of that there. But I broke down really the way that split looked after Austin Eckler was injured and out of the game. And essentially, in a nutshell, it's about a 60-40 split for Kelly versus Jackson. Kelly's got the edge in the rushing game, and then they're essentially splitting the passing work. But, Kelly hasn't looked great. Now, part of that is due to his offensive line. It's also due to the mentality, that the Chargers have. A lot of teams know that they want to really try to run the ball, which is actually helping Justin Herbert because he's getting play action and he's dropping bombs on people. So it's helping Herbert. But teams, to this point, and this is, again, where it could change, Drake. Now Herbert has actually proved I can beat you deep. I can do enough to win a game as Justin Herbert, a rookie quarterback, right? So now what you could see is things start to loosen up a little bit. You're not facing as many 8, 9-man fronts. Now, a lot of that's dictated by the way you come out, what your personnel grouping is, how you line up as far as your formation. That dictates a lot how many players you have in the box. But you start to get more favorable matchups as defenses, can't just be crashing straight down. They've got to respect, the ability of Justin Herbert to pass. So I would say Kelly is my top ad. Number 2 after that would be Chase Edmonds. And Edmonds, is a guy that you kind of surprised me. You said what percentage of leagues is he available? Because he's available.
He's only owned in 37% of Yahoo leagues, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, so he needs to be on rosters. And here's the thing, with Chase Edmonds, Kenyon Drake is still getting pretty much 65-70% of the rushing work. He's still getting, a good percentage, of the passing down work, but all the 2-minute work is going to Edmonds. And whenever Chase Edmonds is in the game, they're designing looks for him. So where he's different than Drake is when he's in the game, it's like over 65% of his passes or his targets are first read targets. And typically for a running back, a first read target is 37%. So he's like almost plus 30% versus the league average for first reads to a running back. So what that tells you is when he's in the game, they're literally designing things for him. So they're trying to get, him involved in ways that allows him to make big plays and be a part of their game plan. So that shows you that they do like him. I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to the idea that Drake's just going to go away. I think that what we're seeing, and I can't validate this, but I think what we're seeing with Kenyon Drake is the walking boot was probably a bigger deal than we thought. I think he's probably still recovering from that. Who knows if he'll be right the rest of the season. But if you watch him, he just doesn't look the same. Drake, he doesn't look as explosive. He just doesn't seem to have any kind of that, electricity, to him. He just seems very, almost monotone. Just take what's what's in front of you. And that wasn't the back, that we saw last year. So I think there's something still going on with his lower body. And maybe that gets right. So I'm not someone that's just dumping Drake. I see a bunch of people completely frustrated, and I get it. I totally get it. And if there's a way you can get him out of your lineup, then you just do it. I'm taking that maneuver myself if I can, but I'm not dropping him. I'm holding on to him. I think he's still an okay buy low candidate if you can really get him, super cheap.
Sure.
Obviously you're not going to pay much for him, but Edmonds would be the next guy in line. Then I would say, the third guy would be Phillip Lindsay. And him and Edmonds are right there together. Lindsay should be coming back. We know he was a guy that was going to be heavily involved with the Broncos offense. Now, whatever that's worth, we need to get Drew Lock back. That's another team that's just suffered injury after injury after injury. You kind of feel for him. This week is not going to be a good matchup. If he comes back, you get to deal with the Patriots. You're going to be a heavy dog at New England. So he's not a guy you're going to want to have in the lineups, but he's definitely a guy you want to stash. Then I would say, the next guy would be Justin Jackson, who's going to be behind Joshua Kelly. I have him in the 5 to 10% range. Lindsay was the 10 to 15%. Edmonds and Kelly are 15 to 30% of your fab. And then I would say Dearness Johnson. Actually, wait, Cam Akers. I know you looked it up before the show. He's only available in like 30%, but you definitely want to go look. So if he's available, I would move him to the top of my list since, McVay is showing that, he just completely basically, went away from Daryl Henderson this last weekend. Who knows? He could go back to Daryl Henderson, and it could just be hot hand all year. But I'm fine with owning Rams backs because if I happen to own the one that does take over, you're in a really good situation for the reasons we talked about on last week's pod. The only other couple of guys, Dearness Johnson, just purely because he's playing in a really good run offense. The Browns and Stefanski, it's a really great situation. We can break him down more here in a little bit. So I would say, 1 to 5% on him. If you own Chubb, you may put a little bit more. It's going to be difficult to trust him. And again, we'll talk about it more in a minute. Keyshawn Vaughn, he's like a 1%er. He could be a guy you use in a pinch this week because there's so many of the, Buccaneers that are injured. It looks like Fournette will be a game time decision. McCoy's probably not going to play. Rojo's really the only guy they have healthy, and all the receivers are hurt too. And now you lose OJ Howard. So they just need somebody that they can get the ball to at least for this week. So he could be a guy that could potentially help you out just for the short term. And then the last one is Devonta Freeman. We can talk about him more again in a little bit as well, but his workload is increasing. I'd say 1 to 5%. He's still just on a terrible team.
Yeah. I don't know how much we talked about him here, and we're going to get to him. We talked about the Patriots, but Damian Harris seems like a guy that if Kelly and Edmonds are owned, he's going to hop up and be that top claim. He ran 17 times for 100 yards. Cam is going to return eventually. Maybe it's this week, but probably for the most part next week. Well, we've talked on this show how, the only back we really want to own here is James White, and White returned this week after his tragic off the field stuff. Harris looked good. I think he kind of put Burkhead and Sony, out to pasture. And I think the Patriots are going to kind of play this IR roulette where all of a sudden, because they have so many running backs, including J.J. Taylor, mysteriously one comes down with a 3-week illness to go on IR. I think Harris is going to be that top claim. What's kind of your long-range view on Damian Harris?
Yeah, he's another guy that's in the 15 to 30%, range. I'm not that excited about it. He looked okay last night. Here's the problem. I don't think he put Burkhead out to pasture. Burkhead got all the carries from inside the 10 and on. He was the guy they trusted. On all the passing down work, it was James White. So Damian Harris, all he was Sony Michel plus the work that Cam Newton wasn't getting on the ground. So as soon as Cam Newton comes back, Damian Harris is Sony Michel. Are we really that excited about that? If you look at what he was used on 0% of third downs, he wasn't used on any of the passing situations in the 2-minute drill. He took 50% of the rushing attempts. Essentially, he was Sony Michel, who also looked good the week before. So I think he's fine for this week because you have Cam Newton out. They're in a game they should be able to lead. So if he's ever going to do anything, it's this week versus Denver. They should, handle that game. Now, again, it depends. I mean, you got Hoyer and Stidham, and you're dealing with that complete mess.
Oh.
But technically, they should be able to just lean on their defense and their run game this coming week. And I could see him having 20, 25 carries, 100, yards, 2 touchdowns, that kind of thing this coming week, and then just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we see Patriots backs do, because I've heard this so many times. Oh, they're going to go away from 3 running backs. They got Sony Michel. I was even saying that. They drafted him in the first round, man. They're going, no, they didn't. They never did. They just kept using all these guys. And then, like you said, Cam Newton will eventually be back. So what would be nice with Damian Harris, you get him, he blows up this week, you trade him. Like, that would be like the ultimate, scenario. And then, you can just send me hate mail if he just keeps going off the rest of the year. But the odds are just low that that's going to happen, right? I mean, we've got how long of a history with the Patriots? How long? I mean, it's 10 years long, and they don't have a guy that they just go with. You're not getting rid of James White, period. He's going to be the passing down back. Your best hope is that you get rid of Burkhead. And again, like we talked about last week, once Cam Newton comes back, well, then now there goes, 70% of your inside the 5 work. So if I'm grabbing him, my plan is that he goes off and I move him.
That's good stuff. I love, because everyone's hyped up and they want to get the guy who put up the big yards, and maybe they didn't catch all the game last night. So they're like, oh, hey, this looks cool. Let me put a bid down on this guy. Let's save the receivers and all that. We'll just go kind of team by team here. We'll get into it, and we'll touch on these guys as we go through. So Arizona obviously is the first team. We just did a long spiel about Edmonds and Drake. Drake, 13 rushes for 35 yards against this lowly Panthers team. Edmonds got to be owned everywhere. If you're a Drake owner like I am, like Duane is, maybe you put him to the bench. Don't get rid of him. Don't sell him low. This is a guy you drafted in the first or second round. Don't give him away for Benny Snell or something this week. Let's be realistic here, folks. Cliff Kingsbury just came out today. I read the quotes where he says, we got to get this guy going for the rest of the season. He's like, we got to get him out in space. So it's a thing. It's, it's on their mind. They know they need to get Drake going. They did give him transition tag money. So we'll see what they get going on with him. Atlanta, Duane, this was brutal last night.
Drake gets the Jets this week, right? So I'm starting him. Like this is not the week I'm benching him.
His schedule is pretty good coming up.
Yeah, I expect the Cardinals to be up. This could be a great game script for him. So I mean, again, I get it if people are down on him. There's something, I've already talked about it. I see it. There's something going on with him. So I think it is a bigger issue than just getting him going. He's got to get himself going too. So again, but against, the Jets, I'm leaving him in there.
Jets, Cowboys, Seahawks. So at least with the Dallas and Seattle games, there'll be shootouts, and these two teams will play no defense. So there's really good chances here, but he's got to get something going in the passing game. We've got to get him back on track there. Trust me, I own Drake all over the place. I'm heavily invested here too.
And he's still getting
in Atlanta.
He's getting 60% of the long down and distance work. Edmonds is getting the 2-minute work. So he's still out there for a decent amount of the pass plays. His routes are still right at 50%, for the year. So essentially, he isn't the potential guy that we thought at the beginning of the year where he literally is getting everything, but he's still getting about 80 to 85% of what we had hoped for, which is still pretty good. So we just need the production to come.
Julio went down, didn't return in the second half of last night's Monday Night Football game. Kelvin Ridley came out with the big goose egg. Thanks a lot. Could have used just one. Gurley, touchdown dependent. The guy literally had a jacket on. They showed him on the sideline. He's got a trench coat on. And then they're like, oh, crap, we need to pull somebody off the scrap heap here to run it in from the 5. Here comes Gurley lumbering in, gets in the end zone. So, that guy in your league who's starting Gurley is like, look, Gurley's still great. He's scoring all these touchdowns. Gurley looks terrible out there. And if you're desperate for somebody off the wire, I doubt Julio plays this week. Olamide is Zacchaeus, 8 for 86. Looks like Gage is still trying to work himself back in, but Zacchaeus could be the guy filling in for an injured Julio. And Ridley he was banged up too. He wasn't a sure thing to come in and play this week. So a deep league play there. Olamide Zacchaeus, probably a really nice DFS play. Anything on the
dude? He's the dude for Julio. I mean, he's shown it 2 weeks in a row. 84% and 74% of routes. It probably would have been like 85% again had Julio not played that first half of the game. 19% and 24% of the targets. He's out there for almost all the 2-minute offense work, almost all the third and fourth down and long work. So, I mean, they're getting this guy involved. And he seems, he's not leaving the field, whereas Russell Gage is. Russell Gage is only out there in the 11 personnel. So, Zacchaeus is a guy that I think is, if you're in a deep league, with deep benches, he's definitely a guy worth carrying. I have Julio Jones on a few teams tonight where I got to go evaluate, like, what do my backups to him look like? And this is a guy that I know I can probably get for really cheap. And I don't have a problem adding him if I've got somebody to drop. Like last week, I picked up a second defense because I didn't want to drop the Patriots, knowing that they get the Broncos this week. So, but I didn't want to play the Patriots versus Kansas City last week. So I've got some easy, crappy defenses I can drop, and this guy will definitely be on my list if I need a receiver.
All right, in Baltimore, I'm seeing people talk about dropping Mark Ingram. You probably got this guy in the third round of your draft 2 weeks ago. He ran 7 times for 30 yards. Last Sunday, 8 rushes for 34 yards. He did get in the end zone, so that kind of saved you a little bit, but this 3-headed monster with Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Ingram, not to mention the quarterback who's the leading rusher on the whole team. This is a mess if you own Mark Ingram.
Yeah, man, it's just what you said. It's an absolute mess. They do have roles for these guys, believe it or not. I mean, and we've talked about what they are, in our week 2 show. Those haven't really changed, but the way they've got it set up is pretty mathematical. It pretty much equals all of them getting almost a third of the work. Now it can tilt a little bit one way or the other each week based on the game script, but essentially Edwards is the closer, Mark Ingram is the opener, J.K. Dobbins is your passing down back. Like, for lack of a better way of explaining it all in the simplest terms, that's the way it works, and you can't use any of them. You can't use any of them. And I know a lot of people are really excited about Dobbins, and I love him, but hopefully if you were listening to the show, we said, no way, you can't take J.K. Dobbins in the 6th round. Hopefully you didn't.
Take him next
year. He's the guy, obviously, to own. He's the one that you're hoping for. But this is the Ravens. This is what they do. We've talked about it for 2 years. They rotate almost all positions except quarterback and offensive linemen. Their, tight ends all get work. Yes, Mark Andrews is having a better year this year because you have Hayden Hurst gone, but they rotate in all these different receivers. I mean, even Hollywood Brown, I mean, he doesn't typically even see almost 80% of the routes. I mean, because they're rotating 3 or 4 guys through. So they do this with all their stuff. So it's not just about, the backs. It's a philosophy. They like to have guys fresh. That's part of the way they play.
We love the guys in our chat room. Guy Steven Dominguez, who's been a big fan of the show, asks about a guy we just mentioned, Zacchaeus. Drop Brandon Cooks, who scored 0.0 points this week, for Zacchaeus. You dropping Brandon Cooks for Zacchaeus this week, Duane?
It all depends on what you need. If you feel that you just have to have someone to start, this next week, and you just don't trust Brandon Cooks, I'm good with it. Like, the guy I still like for the course of the season is Brandon Cooks. I actually went and, watched some of that game after I'd read some comments from Deshaun Watson, and he was right. I mean, basically what happened is, the opposing defense just took Cooks away. I guess they didn't think that Fuller was healthy or whatever, the case may have been, but it was just a situation where they weren't going to let Brandon Cooks beat them. So in one way, that's a positive thing. He got all the coverage because that's other defenses see him as the lead threat right on their offense. Up until that point, he had 5 targets, at least 5 targets each game, despite the fact that he was really hurt early in the season. He's still getting to know his quarterback. So I still have hope for Brandon Cooks. He was out there pretty much the whole time. He's still a young player. He's produced everywhere that he's been, except when he's been hurt. I just don't think that resumes like that completely go away. I mean, he's still too young for that. So I chalk this up more to, you just have the Houston offense just hasn't been able to get going. But I play in super deep leagues, Drake, how it is. So like when I see Brandon Cooks get dropped this week, like I'm going to be scooping him for like $2 and $3, hoping he doesn't go off.
Dude, High Stakes Twitter was angry this week. All your boys there and your $350 buy-ins were pissed. What's going on?
Well, it's just because, everything with COVID and rules changing mid-season. Yeah, I mean, and I get it. People are like, hey, don't be changing the rules in season. And I think that they were actually doing the right thing. The problem was they should have already come up with what the rules are before it happened. So everybody would have known that, look, if this happens, this will be how the rules will change. And I think they're doing it right for the spirit, right, of the contest at the FFPC, to keep, folks engaged. But at the same time, they just executed poorly.
Yeah, I know we got a lot of high stakes guys that listen in. So cheers to you folks out there. I saw you guys fighting on Twitter. Like, oh, geez, it's angry in them there woods. You know where it's not angry, and that's in Orchard Park, because the Buffalo Bills are damn good. And our Bills Mafia friends are going to let us know it, because Josh Allen went from being the worst deep ball passer in the league to adding the best deep ball receiver in the league. And now what do you know? They spread him out. Now they're going 4 wide all the time. And he's a fantastic deep ball passer. They're lights out. Kudos to Josh Allen for improving. We've given him a ton of crap here on the show. And Duane, I got to say this. Hell froze over this week. Devin Singletary scored a goal line touchdown. Whoa. I got to eat some on this. I said he'd never score again. And lo and behold, he got in the end zone.
Yeah, Singletary just needs Zach Moss to stay away. As soon as he comes back, it just really kills his value, because it's basically a 60-40 split. Mm-hmm. With Moss seeing a lot of the high leverage, opportunities. But Singletary's a guy we talked about in the offseason before Zach Moss was even, drafted. And even shortly after he was drafted, we talked about him as being a guy that really, from a tackles avoided standpoint, even yards after contact, yards per carry, yards per reception, all those things were really positive about him. Mm-hmm. Our concern was just that the team had used Frank Gore the way they had until down the stretch. They kind of gave way to Singletary, but then you immediately turn around and draft Zach Moss, which was the issue. So, I mean, as long as Singletary is still, the lone ranger, if you will, operating, I think he's fine. As far as, Josh Allen goes, yes, we've given him a ton of crap, but hopefully you were listening to us for the draft season. And, our advice basically was, if he makes it to the 10th round, like, he should absolutely be your target. Like we talked about, basically the pressure points for quarterback. It was Dak in the 7th and Josh Allen in the 10th. If you followed that, you're feeling pretty good.
I'm just promoting the show on Twitter here. So if you're following the show at FF Hustle, which I hope you are, or me, I'm at Drake Fantasy. Duane is, of course, at Dwain McFarland, DWAIN McFarland. So follow us on Twitter. Hey, we're also on Instagram. Check us out there. We post a few things. There's links to the show, some cool photos. In Carolina, there's nothing cool about DJ Moore and his 6 targets, 4 catches for 49 yards. Everyone last week was saying, hey, well, buy low on DJ Moore. You might get an even better value this week, Duane, because he's just still not getting it done. I mean, he blew up in week 2, and now we're back to kind of some subpar performances. And, I got a team that started Mike Gosicki, Kelvin Ridley, DJ Moore, and some other guy that did nothing. I mean, I'm looking at these guys. I'm scratching my head like, oh, when's it going to turn around for these talents here? So what's up with our boy?
Nothing, dude. I'm good with it. I mean, this is the way things go. We're 4 weeks in. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is what's kind of funny about this. Like, people just bell and they freak out. And there's certain players where you should. But DJ Moore is not one of those. He and Anderson are essentially tied for targets on their team. We already talked about how defenses change in the season. Robbie Anderson's going to start to see more, of the defensive looks. DJ Moore is essentially running the deeper routes, which does
CMC will return.
That's the thing that does hurt is Moore's running the deeper routes. He's not getting all the Mike Thomas stuff, from that Saints offense, which is really the scheme they're running here. For whatever reason, like, Robbie Anderson, the guy that weighs like 112 pounds, is the guy running those routes, which, like, just how could
I resent that as a guy who weighs 112 pounds.
Yeah, but you're also not in the NFL getting hit by linebackers.
Yeah,
so
not anymore.
I just not anymore. Yeah, I just don't. I don't get that. Like, if you look at Robbie Anderson right now, his routes versus linebackers and safeties, 36%, of his targets have come against linebackers and safeties this last week. If you look at it, over the course of the season, it's something similar to that. But I mean, you got to stick with it, on DJ Moore. If you look at his targets, you look at his routes, you look, he's still a young player. I mean, he was the top 36 receiver his rookie year. He's a top 15 receiver in PPR last year and only a sophomore campaign. And that's despite missing a game. And oh yeah, he had a really crappy quarterback last year too that he overcame. So, and remember last year, people felt the same way about DJ Moore after 3 or 4 weeks. And then what did he do? He freaking exploded down the stretch, and there was a period where he was a top 3 receiver for about 5 or 6 weeks over that stretch. And I expect the same thing from DJ Moore. It's not like his talent has changed. It's just one of those deals where it's just this weird thing. I mean, in all honesty, like I think it can be a good thing that you have Robbie Anderson to help take away some of the pressure, that's on him.
If you guys go over to pff.com, you go to establishtherun.com, you're going to find Duane's utilization report. In there, he breaks down tons of players and a lot of deep stash kind of guys. One of them, we're going to let the cat out of the bag for the Chicago Bears, is Darnell Mooney. So Anthony Miller's kind of fading away. Darnell Mooney's kind of emerging. Tell us a little bit about this kid and what's going on in the Bears offense with him. Yeah,
I mean, it's just one of those deals where you're seeing a consistent, trend, over the first 4 weeks with Mooney. You've seen his routes, he's a 5th round pick, and you've seen his routes increase each week. It went in week 1, he was 30%, of the routes, week 2, 64%, week 3, 67%, and then week 4, 76%. Now, the good thing for him, is also that he doesn't play really out of the slot. Only like 15% of his work comes from the slot. So he's not dependent on the team being in 11 personnel groupings, because this is an offense that likes to use 2 tight ends. They like to get, 2 running backs on the field. They do some different things. So Mooney's in a situation where, you just kind of, if you can buy low on him now, I would. He's not a guy I would spend a ton of money on. But the way I look at it is the Bears, really their number 2 option in the passing game right now, Drake, it's wide open. Like, who is it after Allen Robinson? It could be Mooney. Jimmy Graham has even had some good games. It could still be, our guy Anthony Miller. The problem for Miller is outside of the slot work, he's just not getting as much run. Now, he played just as much as Mooney this last weekend. It was because they were behind pretty much the whole game, with the Colts, and so they were using 11 personnel, more often than what they usually do. Now, maybe that's what the Bears choose to do, is they decide that really the best way to win is to get all 3 of these receivers on the field. So that's something, that we can, that I'll be monitoring, as we move forward. There could be, it could literally be a situation where the Bears have shifted to more 11 personnel. But right now, I mean, they're only at 57%, on the year in 11 personnel, which is, in the bottom tons of teams up around 80, 76, 73%, of 3 wide receivers, if you don't know what 11 personnel means.
Question from the chat room. I got to add one. Mooney or Mecole Hardman, Duane? Who you picking up this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with Mooney. And the reason why is just because he's playing, and they have similar skill sets. Of course, you like the Chiefs offense more. But, I mean, you see what happens with Hardman. I mean, essentially, you're just hoping boom bust every week. Now, Mooney could end up being the same guy. Just because you run more routes doesn't mean you're going to be great. I mean, we've seen Mooney before. His name was Taylor Gabriel, right? I mean, it's the same kind of guy. It's a fast guy that they like to use underneath, get him run after the catch ability. He can stretch the field occasionally. So, he's one of these guys that Nagy's got a spot for him in his offense. But you got to give him the credit to see if he can be more than what Taylor Gabriel was, because that opportunity is wide open. As far as Mecole Hardman goes, he can't block. He's essentially splitting the 3rd wide receiver role with Demarcus Robinson, and nothing's changed. He's worth a deep shot here or there. He'll catch a shovel pass, for a touchdown at the goal line. He'll catch a deep bomb occasionally, but he's just a guy that's really hard to trust. And I just don't know that even if, say, Sammy Watkins went down, it doesn't end up going to Hardman because he can't run block. They just immediately put Robinson out there more. So I think the issue with Hardman is I don't know how many injuries it takes for him to get to be the guy that's on the field. I think essentially it means Tyreek Hill needs to go down for him to really have a path to where we'd be like, oh man, he's out there for 80% of the routes, 70% of the routes. And again, you don't have to be out there 80%, with Mahomes. 70, 65% is going to be enough, with Mahomes, whereas Mooney, you probably need 80%, with Foles. But I still just prefer to take, the guy that I think is going to be on the field more and could carve out, maybe a 20 to 22% target share role. We know that's not happening, for Mecole Hardman. Again, I like Hardman. He shouldn't be on most wires. Like, I want him stashed everywhere I can have him, just in case, because we do know what the Chiefs offense is capable of.
If you didn't scoop him last week, go get yourself some T. Higgins. One guy you're not going to get, but if you read Dwayne's article, you might want to move, is Joe Mixon. Blew up this week. Finally, we had the Joe Mixon explosion game. 25 for 151 and 2 on the ground. Caught 6 balls, Duane. Holy smokes. 30 yards and another touchdown. Unbelievable. But in your article, you kind of say maybe you can move Mixon here. I like where you're going with this. Explain.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Mixon's role didn't change. The game script changed. And we talked about this with Mixon even in the preseason. We said, look, essentially he, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs were the guys we said, look, they're not going to catch a ton of passes, but when they're in good matchups, they're going to blow up for you, right? I mean, so essentially, what are we seeing? Surprise, 5 weeks in, that's what all of those guys are. And so you have to live with the ups and downs if you drafted them. If you want to hold them, I don't blame you. It doesn't mean that they can't have value. You just have to live with the ups and downs. And when you think about Mixon, right away, he's going to get the Ravens this week. Do you think Joe Mixon's value is higher this week or next week after the Ravens? Well, after that, you get the Colts. Okay. So, I mean, there's just not going to be many matchups where you're going to really think that the Bengals, are going to be the favorite. Now, their offense is improving. I do like what Joe Burrow's doing. But again, he's still a rookie quarterback. You still got young players. And you've got a really crappy offensive line that still sucks. So it's just a lot of bad things, for Mixon. So the way I look at him, I'm not telling you to go give him away. What I'm telling you is if you can make the right kind of deal, say, for example, you can go grab, some of these guys, some of these folks in your leagues, they're dying for a
They
running
just
back.
lost
And they all of a
Eckler.
sudden
They
see a
just
guy
lost
that's
Chubb.
30. For that, dude, you got guys that haven't had one since the beginning of the year. And they say, wow, there's a guy with 40 points and you're willing to move him to me. And you're like, yeah, I'll send him to you for what? Calvin Ridley and James Robinson. And guess what you just did? You essentially just got Joe Mixon back and a wide receiver 1. Somebody's down on Ridley this week. Oh, man, he didn't catch a ball. And James Robinson, yeah, man, I got him on the wire, man. I've been lucky to get anything out of him. Yeah, you have been lucky. He sucks. You trade Mixon for like both guys. And people will do that kind of crap. We see it, all the time. So, I mean, that's the kind of deal. I'm not telling you to go trade Joe Mixon for, Drake, insert some name, here. Don't trade, Joe Mixon, for a wide receiver 3, or a borderline wide receiver 2. Get a stud in return, a guy that is going to be involved in his offense every week, and you're targeting someone that's weak at the position in your league. Otherwise, just hold him and play him. You're just going to have to deal with the ups and downs. You can't bench guys like this because they do this. But think about it. They played the Jaguars. This was the week. I even talked about it on Twitter as much as, I dog Mixon. I said, look, play him this week. Hold him because this is the week he could go off. This is the week he could score multiple touchdowns because the game script's going to be right.
We talked a lot about the Cleveland Browns already with Dearness Johnson, Dontrell Hilliard. Chubb's going to miss 6+ weeks. Really unfortunate. On a play he's blocking. He wasn't even running the ball on the play. He got rolled up on as he was protecting, basically. OBJ goes off in the game. Landry throws a touchdown pass. But this is a Cleveland Browns team, Duane, that really they don't want to showcase Baker Mayfield. They want to pound the rock. And we're going to get to your Cowboys next. Holy smokes, they pounded it down their throat.
Yeah. I get it. I mean, but this is the Stefanski offense. We talked about it again. I hate to keep going back to it, but I feel good about the information we were able to bring. We definitely got some things wrong, this preseason, but I feel really good about like the thought process we had this preseason and the kind of information that we brought to people. And we talked about the Stefanski offense. We talked about them really wanting to create plays in the passing game through efficiency, not through volume. And we're seeing that. There's only been really one game where they couldn't get the efficiency out of the ground game, and that was week 1 against the Ravens. But since then, it's been all about play action. We talked a little bit about Odell Beckham Jr. being a buy low candidate, and this was why. Because, he's getting 47%, Drake, of his targets come on play action passing, and he has 29% target share on the season for the team. Here Odell Beckham Jr.'s target share is 29%, 30%, 29%, 27%, 31%. Now, again, those don't equal 10 and 15 like on some teams, but when you're getting them in an efficient offense and you're the funnel, which essentially is what's happening, Beckham's the funnel. Landry is a tertiary guy along with Austin Hooper. They're kind of, neither one of them are even a 2. They're kind of splitting the work of a 2, which makes them both 3s, right? And then you get Kareem Hunt involved as basically another 3 out of the passing, out of the backfield as a passing option. But yeah, I mean, everything's based around this run game. It really sucks that Nick Chubb got hurt. Dallas had no answers. Well, no team has had answers for Nick Chubb really this season, period. He's the best running back on the ground in the game today. But now you're going to see a ton of Kareem Hunt. If you did draft Kareem Hunt, and we talked about this in the preseason, if Chubb ever went down, obviously, I mean, you're going to love it.
This is the dream.
He's going to be the RB1 over the next 6 weeks if his growing's okay. He's going to outscore every other running back. I don't even care what his matchups are. He's going to outscore all running backs in fantasy football for as long as it takes Nick Chubb to come back. Now, again, assuming that he's healthy, because this last week we saw that they didn't really change his role once Chubb left the game. They actually let Dearness Johnson basically take over those extra carries that Chubb left on the table. I'm assuming that is because of the growing issue. So we could see that linger a week or two. And if you're facing the Kareem Hunt owner, believe me, that's what you want. This dude's going to score 30 every week that he's not hurt moving forward. So you're going to hope that if you don't own him, that he is hurt if you're facing him, because it's really, really, really going to suck. So we'll have to see. I'm starting him everywhere if I own him. I'll be using him like all over the place in DFS this weekend. I don't care if his matchup sucks. It doesn't matter. You got to get him in your lineup.
Well, how about a trade question right from the chat room? Should I trade Hunt and Mike Davis for Amari Cooper? Cooper owner lost Eckler and Chubb. That seems like a very, very rich price for Amari Cooper, who I know is, I think, wide receiver 1 right now. But to me, Duane, that is excessive to get Amari Cooper.
Well, I mean, we say that, but Amari Cooper's going to be there the whole season. Hunt and Mike Davis's role may only last another 2 to 3 weeks, and then
maybe 1 week. We don't know.
And then with Hunt, we really don't know. They're saying 6 weeks, but Nick Chubb's also one of these guys where people are like, he's an insane healer. So whatever that means, I don't know the scientific, data behind that, but even his own coach said, but it is Nick Chubb. So I'm not really going to put a timeline on it because it could be like 4 weeks. So most professionals that, like Gene Bramall, those guys, they're saying that, it's not going to be easy for Chubb to come back from it, really quickly. So it depends on your roster, Drake. If you have 2 other really good running backs and your receivers are crap, I would do it. But to your point, because that other person's hurting so bad, I would try to squeeze a little more out of them. But at the same time, I mean, you don't have to go nuts because they also know they're getting Eckler and Chubb back, right? So, what you could try to do, say, look, man, I'll send you Hunt and, Davis for Cooper and throw in like a back, even if it's just a backup running back that you just want to roster in case another injury happens and you get to hold another lottery ticket. Just little things like that you can do in a trade. Like maybe they own Pollard, maybe they own, Chase Edmonds, things like that they look at it. They're not going to let that break the deal. And it's not like it's going to totally swing the deal in your favor. It's still a fair trade, but it gives you another out, basically. I think of everything in like, poker terms. It just gives you another out later in the season. So if something happens, you could again hit another lottery ticket.
Let me hit you with a couple of real fast ones here. Rapid fire. Yep. You're 1-3. Consider trading Miles Sanders for Kareem Hunt.
No.
All right. Next question. PPR. Mixon for Hunt and DJ Moore.
Yes.
There you go. Got a couple of quick hitters here. Duane, what's going on in Dallas? Why your Cowboys have absolutely no defense, but they're throwing the ball a ton.
Yeah, and so this is another. If you're following my Twitter account, like I was literally feeding the breadcrumbs for Odell Beckham's huge weekend. That was my most owned DFS play this last weekend was Odell Beckham Jr. And it's because of the things I just shared. Just so for you guys that are new to the show, one of the best ways, especially beyond just target shares and volumes and things like that, is to look for receivers or players that have seen an increase in their play action targets. And Beckham was like square in the crosshairs, 40, 50% of his targets.
It's going to be the new air yards. That's going to be your thing.
Right. And it's it goes back to Josh Hermsmeyer. He's the guy that invented air yards. He's actually the first guy I heard talk about some of this stuff with, so it wasn't me. I heard him talking about the play action stuff, which I knew. I knew play action was huge. I knew that it, was a cheat code for quarterbacks, and I knew that it obviously helped receivers. But once I heard him talking about it more, I actually started digging into all the receivers and looking at, kind of the way that my projection models work, and looking at historically some of the receivers that have seen the biggest jumps in their yards per catch and their yards after catch, depending on, where they're being targeted. And it came back to these folks seeing play action. So if you think of Deebo Samuel last year, who went nuts as a rookie. If you think about A.J. Brown, who went nuts as a rookie. So now Odell Beckham Jr. is playing this very similar, just think of all the Kyle Shanahan offenses and insert receiver's name here, right? There's a big reason, and it ties to this thing. And so that's where it was coming from with Beckham. But the other component where I'm going back to the Cowboys is the Cowboys have given up, more plays over 20 yards as a percentage than any other team in the NFL. The Seahawks are right there with them. I would have to go look, but I'm sure the Falcons are right there. Did you see the play on the where I don't remember if it was Greasy or who it was last night, Drake, where he froze it? It may have been Riddick, but they froze it and they said, it's one thing to have one guy open, but you're not used to literally everybody on your team being open. And it was off of a play action play, and it was where, one of the guys had run like this pivot route. It was like their third receiver, who I can't even remember now. But then you had Marquise Valdez-Scantling's guy had fallen down, and he was coming open. Like Tanyan was open. And literally there's no Falcon within 3 yards of any of these dudes. It's the same way with the Cowboys. Mike Nolan should be fired. The same thing, for the Falcons. They're Dan Quinn should be fired. I have no clue how he still has a job today. But Jerry Jones has said he's not doing it. It's not the time to do it. I don't know why it's not the time. The guy obviously hasn't installed anything yet.
Looking up at that first place 1-2-1 Philadelphia Eagles squad. Woo! Look out.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And that's the crazy thing. The Cowboys could still easily win, the division, because, they do still have, I would say they've at least got the most offensive talent. Obviously their defense is terrible, right now.
Mm-hmm. I don't have much on the Broncos. If Phillip Lindsay's out there in a super deep league, Tim Patrick is going to get looks because everybody's hurt. I don't know anything else, Duane.
Yeah, it's just going to be tough this weekend. You get the Patriots. So I think those guys are fine to snag and get them for cheap. Just don't rush them into your lineups this weekend. So if you're missing, like Lions, and you're trying to figure out, hey, how am I going to replace Galladay? And maybe you also have Julio, who's out, with an injury. I would really not feel very good about putting Patrick in my lineup, despite overall, I'm like, okay, this guy has shown something. We'll get Drew Lock here back before long. Maybe he can do something for you. You just don't want to use it this weekend.
Nothing on the Lions. They're on bye this week. We'll hit them next time. In Green Bay, obviously the waiver wire is going to be frothed with people looking for Robert Tonyan. 3 touchdowns last night on Monday Night Football. He's kind of become that second option. And remember, Devontae Adams isn't there right now. He hasn't played in a few weeks. So they're on bye this week. If you go pick up Tonyan, remember, you're going to need a tight end this week because they're off. But, man, what a performance. I picked him up and plugged him in a lineup or two. And, I mean, people are going to say, oh, it's fluky. It's one of these things that doesn't happen. But I think there's, to the contrary, I think he's a legit part of this passing offense, Duane.
Yeah, I mean, he works out with George Kittle. I mean, what else do we need to know?
Yeah, I mean, that's like somebody who has lunch with Sean McVay. You get a head coaching job.
Exactly. No, man, I like Tonyan. I own him in a dynasty startup that I was in this year where I drafted him. And it's funny because it was in like April. I drafted Sternberger and I was like, I'm going to go ahead and grab Tonyan, as well. And it was actually after the draft, just because, I was, just kind of cluing in that Sternberger didn't sound like he was doing too well. And Tonyan is a guy that, I've always kind of had some intrigue with. And then I have him in Scott Fishbowl. He nearly brought me all the way back last night. So, yeah, he's a guy that I like. If you look at him, It's like you said, I mean, and we talked about this before the season, and it didn't mean that someone was guaranteed. The answer could be no one would step up to be the number 2 receiver in Green Bay.
Yeah.
But Tanyan and Lazard have really been the 2 guys, and now Lazard's out. MVS is, he's showing some things. I think he's playing decent. I don't think he sucks. I think he's actually playing pretty good. I mean, he led the team in targets last night. I think he's still not quite there. And it's hard to compare Tanyan and MVS. MVS was facing, the best corner on the other team. If anybody got double coverage last night, it was him, and all the play action stuff was going to Tanyan. So last night, I mean, back to play action, 3 of his receptions and 50 of his yards came off of play action passing. So over half of his production was super efficient based on that. So, I mean, Valdez-Scantling had 25% of the targets versus only 19%, for Tanyan. But I think Tanyan at a minimum, will be like the 3rd guy when Lazard gets back and when, Adams is back. So he's a guy that I like. He's the way I think of him, Drake, is he's going to give you some bumps in the road, right? Mm-hmm. He does stay in the block a decent amount, but he's still out and around almost about 70%. He's slightly below that on the season, which is decent enough. So think Jonnu Smith. You're in an offense that's not going to run a ton of volume, but it's really efficient, and you can make a lot out of your 5 or 6 targets. Tanyan and Jonnu Smith, I would say, are in the same tier for me. They get the same kind of utilization. They play in balanced but explosive offenses. You're never going to see 10 or 15 targets. It just ain't going to happen. But 4 or 5 is really all they need. They can catch one and, get 30 yards on run after the catch, and then they score a touchdown for you, and you're like, boom, I'm in business. That's all I needed from my tight end for the weekend, and I'm good to go.
Tight end's a wasteland, man. How much fab are you going to spend on Tanyan if you need a tight end?
Man, if you really need a tight end, like I think I gave you your answer. How much would you spend on Jonnu Smith right now? I think he's if you've really been struggling there, and your question essentially to me is can he keep doing this? I just gave you the answer, and it's yes, he can keep doing this even when Adams and these guys come back, because it's not like he's getting 25% of the target straight. He's getting 15 to 18. He can still do that with those other guys back. Is he going to have a 10% week? Yeah, but he can still catch a touchdown on that week. So if I really need a tight end, your league better than me, but I'm willing to spend what I think I need, to get him. So I'm saying anywhere, this is a lot on a tight end, right? 15 to 25% of my fab, I would be willing to put on Robert Tanyan if I feel like that's the missing link, to my team. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if I'm obviously in a tight end premium, I mean, I would be willing to drop, up to 50%, of my roster, of my fab on Robert Tanyan.
I learned this weekend, Duane, never to tweet and drive. I think I was on my way to my son's baseball game, and I saw the news of Bill O'Brien being fired. So I did this. I just had this thought come into my mind of like, oh man, what if the Texans traded Deshaun Watson to rebuild? But I didn't word it very well. I'm like tweeting, and like everybody blows up at me, and they're like, "Hey, idiot! They don't have a first round pick. It's the Dolphins." And I know that. I'm like, oh, gee, I see how this reads. I'm a moron. So I own up to. I didn't delete the tweet. I left it out there. It was
Yeah, you've had some pretty popular tweets like in the last few days.
Oh yeah, well, we'll get into the Gosicki stuff in a few minutes. But
not the Gosicki stuff. What was it? You had one that you put out there.
Oh, the one last night. The picture of Kelvin Ridley.
Yes, or Calvin Ridley.
Wide open in the end zone.
Superstar. Like you had like 1,000 likes, and it was insane. It went nuts. It was almost as good as Debro's GIF today of the Mo Alley Cox. Did you see that?
I don't think I did.
You got to go look at Debro's feed. It's Mo Alley Cox, inside the 5-yard line. It's this giant running around like all these kids. He's so huge. It's awesome.
So I took my medicine. I said, I'm not going to delete this tweet, but, Bill O'Brien was fired. Romeo Crennel takes over. He's like 95 years old. Tim Kelly, still the OC and play caller. Do you expect any changes here? Any signs of life for Duke Johnson? Brandon Cooks did nothing for us. I mean, or is it just this team stinks? I mean, what are you going to do?
Look, I mean, it's a team that the coach got fired because they should be performing better than this. This is not a terrible team. This team,
they got great talent on offense.
They lost DeAndre Hopkins, which I think they underestimated, right? How valuable he was. I think they're obviously seeing that. I mean, here's the deal. Fire Bill O'Brien last year before he just turns your team, before he does all this crap. Now you're bringing a new coach in without DeAndre Hopkins. You don't have any of these picks, and you're saddled with David Johnson. It's just like, it is a mess. But you do have, this guy named Deshaun Watson. Mm-hmm. And guess what? He's still pretty good. You can't hold this guy down forever. Again, think about it. He and Brandon Cooks are still getting on the same page. He and Randall Cobb are starting to show their groove. Will Fuller's doing his thing kind of on and off, battling injuries. Jordan Akins, who's kind of starting to show a little bit. He got a concussion last week. David Johnson is kind of more what I thought. I know everybody got excited week 1, but he just doesn't look very good to me. Doesn't look very fast. Doesn't look, very nimble. Looks like a guy that understands angles. Looks like a guy that, knows how to play football, but not somebody I'm really excited about. Yeah. And you got Duke Johnson back. So, I mean, I think there's some pieces, so you're not going to put in a whole new offense at this point. So it's really just probably about simplifying things, trying to get your playmakers involved. I would expect them to really try to do more with Cooks and Fuller. Mm-hmm. Stills, of course, caught a touchdown last week, unlike Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks killed me in that last week. But anyway, I'm not just dumping all this offense. Again, we're 4 weeks in. Things change. Mm-hmm. and they still have the improvements they made on their offensive line. It's not like their whole team's been hurt. It's not like they've been ravaged by injuries. They've played some other good teams, and they've gotten off to a rocky start. It happens. But if there's a team that I think could go from being 0-4 like they are to all of a sudden being 4-4, like they have what's necessary, I think, to make that happen. Now, despite Romeo Crennel, who I'm really not a fan of, but all we care about, right, is the offense, really, from a standpoint of fantasy.
The defense is terrible, so he needs to maybe focus on that a little bit more.
Yeah, David Johnson could be in real trouble here. With Duke Johnson getting back, like his routes dropped to 33%. That is bad for David Johnson. David Johnson's value really needs to come through the air. He's not really that good of a running back anymore. I don't even know what he's averaging. I know yards per carry is overrated, but I mean, it's really bad. It's like 3 yards per carry or something like that. He just doesn't, look good. And I know it's not just due to an injury. At least with Kenyon Drake, we can say, well, maybe it's the boot thing from preseason. He's still a young guy. We know he's electric last year, and maybe he gets healthy and everything comes together for him. With David Johnson, this is the guy that really for the last 2 years we've seen, he really wasn't very good. Now, he did have injuries. But even, before his injury last year, a lot of it was to do with the scheme, that he was operating in. So I'm really leery about David Johnson, at this point. And really DFS is like daring us. They're just daring us to play David Johnson in a decent matchup this weekend against the Jaguars.
Hey, did you go to your junior prom?
Yes.
I did not. Instead, I went to see Austin Powers when it opened. This is 1996, 97. I went to Hooters with my friends for dinner, and then I went to see ECW wrestling at the New York State Fairgrounds here in Syracuse. And the staple of ECW is the three-way dance. And that's exactly what we have at tight end in Indianapolis. That is a very roundabout, lead-in to a team, but we have a three-way dance here in Indy. Corey Richmond, who's watching the show, he'll appreciate that. We got Jack Doyle. We got our man Mo Alley Cox. And welcome back, Trey Burton. So you wrote these guys up in your article. Mo Alley Cox scores again. If he's on your waiver wire, I know people are going to be putting in for him. What's the usage like, versus, how much we expect from this guy going forward? And is he just kind of the guy now? He's going to click with Rivers and listen, he's the man. Put him in.
He's not the man, though. I mean, he's running a route on 24% of team dropbacks. It doesn't really get worse than that. You're literally, that is close your eyes and pray for a touchdown. That's all that is. And don't get me wrong, I like Mo Alley Cox, but this is one of those deals, I think sometimes people get really frustrated, with me, Drake, because they just want to believe in the talent. And I get it, because we all do. We all just want to believe in Jonathan Taylor. We all just want to believe in Joe Mixon. We all can see it. We know he's good. And it's hard for us to comprehend that a coach may not just let that person run with all this additional workload we think they should have. So they would be great for us in fantasy because obviously they're a good football player. Well, that's what you have playing out here with Mo Alley-Cox. He clearly, as far as a receiver, he's the best option that they have, maybe on the team, not even just as a tight end. So you always want to bet on talent. So he's a guy that if you're in a deeper league, you got a deep bench. Mo Alley-Cox is a guy you definitely want to stash. You just don't want him in your starting lineup right now. You really need like Trey Burton or Jack Doyle to go away. They're both out snapping him. They're both running more routes than he is. They're all getting a sprinkling in of targets. The one positive thing, that I'll give for him, Drake, is on, the 3rd down and 7+ yards or 4th down and 7+ yards. He is, out of those 3, seeing the most snaps, 55%. Now, still, that's not great. Like, he's seeing half of it. So he's also the guy that gets the targets down towards the end zone. So it's like the coaches know they can use him in situations. They want to get him involved, but they just don't, and again, I don't know the whole inside scoop, but most likely this is a guy that's still learning how to play football. He was a basketball player. Think back to what was the guy back, Drake, when we were in college for Indianapolis? Pollard, their tight end. Remember Pollard?
Marcus Pollard, yeah.
Marcus Pollard, yeah, maybe like Tony Pollard's uncle or something. I don't know. But it's the same kind of thing, as a guy that, played college basketball. They're kind of easing him in. He's still learning the game. He's probably just not ready for the full load, and it's nothing to do with his talent. It's due to he's learning the playbook. He still may not be the best blocker. There's a lot of things that be going on that we just don't know, that basically, maybe, if they get him out there 100%, all of a sudden there's 40% of the things that he's just not ready for. So he's a guy to stash, but in small and shallow leagues, I'm willing to drop him if I need to move on to grab something else, because this is just not what we wanted to see. I was hoping Trey Burton would just basically be, okay, Trey Burton, we're going to activate you, but you're backing everybody up. Nope, Trey Burton immediately surpassed him.
Let's keep it rolling here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. James Robinson, very workmanlike, 17 for 75, caught 4 for 32. I want to ask you how he's looking on 3rd downs, if he's playing on any. First of all, if this guy's on your waiver wire, I don't know if we'll get to him or not. Laviska Shenault, 5 for 86, quality player right there on a team that has to throw all the time. But more people probably concerned with Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, with Robinson, essentially you got Josh Jacobs or Joe Mixon for free. That's what he is. He gets basically all of the attempts. He gets limited work in the passing game. If the script is decent, he gives you a shot at scoring. Basically, look, Robinson the week before, scored 30 points. The next week, Mixon goes off for 45. The good news for Robinson is he actually did it in a game where the Jaguars were losing, to the Dolphins on that Thursday night game. We still haven't seen Mixon do anything in a game, where they're trailing, for the most of the game. But it's a small sample size. So the thing I would say with Robinson, if you own him, you don't need to be in a rush to sell him. It's just like if you own Mixon or you own Josh Jacobs, you just kind of got to go with the bumps and the bruises. You got to keep starting these guys. They're going to some weeks give you 10, 8 points. Still, it's not the worst thing ever. It's not going to win you your game. But then on the weeks they blow up, they give you 25 or 30 because they are capable of scoring 2 touchdowns. The thing I'll say for Robinson, this past week that was nice, Drake, and we'll see, it could just be a blip, but he took 50% of the 2-minute offense work away from Chris Thompson. So if he continues to do that and he maybe bumps that up to 60, and then maybe he takes 30, 40% of the long down and distance, which last week he still got 0% of. That was still Chris Thompson. So it's almost like they could slowly just be giving this guy more and more and more. We've seen his snaps go up. Mm-hmm. We've seen his routes go up. He's been pretty consistent, with his percentage, the team attempts, but last week was 89%. He had been at 79, 64, 76. So he is a guy that there's enough there that you could be saying, wow, they could be on the path to turning this guy into literally a bell cow. Now he's not in a great offense, doesn't have a great offensive line, so he's not a bell cow like what you get with Zeke or Dalvin Cook or some of these other guys, but still a guy that's on the field all the time that has some electricity to him. And look, the Jacksonville Jaguars, their offense hasn't been great, but it's also not terrible. They're moving the ball for the most part better than what most people expected, I think. Especially like NFL analysts. I think fantasy folks were probably a little higher because some of the young guys like Chark and Chenault that they had, on their squad, and there was even some Minshew love. So I like Robinson. As far as Chenault goes, I still really like, Chenault, and he's one of these guys that even though his target percentage, for the season is sitting at a 15%, his targets per route is 20%. So he owns 15% of the targets for the team, but on 20%, and when he's running a route, he's targeted 20% of the time. So he's one of these unique players that, he's out there less like an Aaron Jones, but when he's out there, they design things to get into him. We talked about Chase Edmonds earlier, same kind of thing. There's certain guys in the league that it's like they really are scheming them up. And so Laviska Shenault is one of those. So even though when you look at his routes, this last week, 47%, which was really low, he had been at 65% the week before. But then you look at last week, 17% target share, but he was targeted 26% of the time he was in a route. So they are trying to get the guy involved. I think he's a nice wide receiver 4 with occasional wide receiver 3 flex, value. But again, an offense that could continue to improve. And so he's a guy that you definitely want to have on the end of your bench.
Yeah, what I like about Shenault is he's a guy, if you put out there, he's your wide receiver 4, perfect for a bye week. Or so, there you go, Duane pounding the PBR here. We got to give the guy a chance to breathe once in a while. Great guy to have if you need a COVID situation breaks out again, somebody's injured like Devontae Adams, you need a plug and play option. So just a good guy to have because he's going to be involved in the offense. Another guy who's involved in his offense, nobody's pushing him for time. That's Clyde Edwards. How did Steve Levy do it? Clyde Edwards, Elair, like super over enunciated it.
It was really annoying, actually, but it kept annoying me.
Yeah,
but yes, you nailed it.
As the third biggest sportscaster to come out of SUNY Oswego behind Steve Levy and Linda Cohn. I got to stick up for my boy there.
Certain ways he pronounces certain things, just for whatever reason, and it's not me bashing on him. Everybody's got it. Some people probably think I talk like a hick, so whatever. So as far as Edwards-Helaire goes, what else do you want? The guy.
It just kind of ho-hum. Didn't you say last night we were texting?
Here's what's funny about Helaire. He's really also the 3 guys we just talked about, but he's in an amazing offense that's always up. See, that's like how all the puzzle pieces of fantasy football come together, Drake. It's like I could have put Edwards-Helaire in that same tweet I did earlier showing their utilization all being exactly the same. The difference for Edwards-Helaire is, he's probably going to finish up ahead of those guys because the Chiefs lead all the time. They just don't really trail that often in games, whereas those other 3 teams do trail, which means you're going to see more ups and downs. Because really for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, from a 2-minute, offense standpoint, this last week he saw, they didn't even need, you'll see that's the other, they didn't even need to run their 2-minute offense this last week. But if you look at him for the season, he's only getting 30% of that. If you look at him on long down and distance, he's only getting 16% for the season. So he's still not the obvious passing down back. That's Darrell Williams. But how often are the Chiefs forced into a situation where they have to be in a come behind situation? It's far less than Jacksonville, Oakland, right? And Cincinnati. And so that's really what helps, Edwards-Helaire. One thing I'll say with Edwards-Helaire, Drake, and I'll let you talk, I texted you about this. It looks like he's got great vision. He obviously understands. I was
going to bring this up.
He's doing some really good things, but man, he doesn't look explosive. He's not, and I know people talked about this. He's not going to be the guy to break the long gainers, but he's really not. When I watch him, I'm like, oh man, really good run. He's about to get caught. That's immediately what I think. And guess what? He gets caught. So he's not Brian Westbrook. He's definitely not Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt, broke the big ones all the time. Edwards-Helaire is getting caught. He's almost more like Emmitt Smith, right? Now, Emmitt Smith would have situations where everybody was piled in the old days, and then he would break one, and he would still get these really long runs, but it's the way the defenses were playing him. Against the Chiefs, everybody respects the pass so much. There's always somebody deep, right, that can catch Edwards-Helaire. Now, again, this is not a knock on him. He's playing great. He's super tough. He takes huge hits. He just bounces right off of him. Got great center of gravity. He's elusive. but he doesn't try to make like 20 cuts. It's like he kind of knows what he needs to do, and he does it. He's really efficient. He's got his economy, of the way that he operates is great. But it's like that one thing you're like, is he really going to give me like a 50 or 60 yard run? Probably not. Maybe 1 or 2 this year, but he's just not going to give you the 6 or 7 that you could hope for, out of an offense like the Chiefs.
Yeah, for sure. You had some interesting notes about Josh Jacobs. Is he elite? Are they getting other guys involved? What's going on here? Because the team is after their 2-0 start, and was like, oh, the Raiders are back, blah blah blah. Oh, they just lost 2 in a row, and they're the same Raiders that we thought they were. And Mr. Mascara is crying in the post-game press conferences about, I'm sick of losing, blah blah blah. Enough. This team stinks. Don't at me, Raider fans. This team ain't going anywhere.
Give him respect, Greg. He wants respect.
Yeah, throw the ball more than 3 yards down the field. Yeah, all the receivers are hurt. Waller's still the man, but just a little nugget here on Jacobs, if you could.
I mean, Jacobs is in the same boat as Mixon, as James Robinson. Plays on a team that's probably slightly better than those two, so maybe you get a little bit less of the trailing situations, but he's just not active enough in the passing game. Now, what I'll say is he's slightly active, more active than those two. So he sees about 30% of long down and distance. He sees about 30% of the 2-minute offense. So it's not like he's a complete zero in those situations, but still, you want your backs up over 50% in those situations, and ideally 60, 70%. Now, again, it is what it is. You roll with him. What I like, though, about Jacobs is John Gruden schemes up ways to get him the ball on first and second down, where those other two, unless their team is leading, they really don't get that. So Gruden will still do this, even though they may be behind. It'll be second down 5, and he'll throw a screen pass. Josh Jacobs. It's not like a real popular screen down, but he'll design things up, and he'll do things like that for Jacobs. So Jacobs, similar to what I talked about earlier, with Chase Edmonds. What's nice about him is they are designing things so 56% of his targets comes on the first read. In 2019, on average, running backs got 37% of their targets as a first read target. So he's about 20% above the NFL average from last year. So again, that's a data point that shows you they're doing specific things to try to get him involved in the passing game. So even though he's not out there as much as we would want on those other situations, Gruden's finding a way to still get him, 4 to 5 targets each week.
Hey, were you a Van Halen fan?
Yeah, man, I was sad.
Yeah, Eddie Van Halen passed away today. Cancer. Yep. Sad to see.
Yeah, it sucks. He's been battling that, for a while. I can't even remember when I first heard about that, but yeah, man, I was bummed when I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, I was never a huge Van Halen guy, but I love
the first music videos I really remember. Like, I remember being over at my cousins' houses, and they were older than me, and they would have music videos on in the summer. I'm like, man, what is this? And like Van Halen, was always on, or it would be a live performance by Van Halen. And so that was kind of like my first exposure to like music videos and rock and roll. So yeah, it's like this nostalgic thing for me. And it's not like I just, turn their records all the time, but I pretty much know most of their work, and it's something that was kind of part of my childhood. So yeah, bums me out.
Van Halen or Van Hagar? What are you more into?
Van Halen.
Yeah. The David Lee Roth stuff. Yeah. It's sad to see, man. 2020. What a year. Holy smokes. It's a pretty bad year, obviously, for many things, but it's a bad year if you get stabbed in the lung by your team doctor, and that's what happened to Tyrod Taylor a few weeks back. And Justin Herbert, maybe they're going to stop calling it being Wally pipped. You're going to be Justin Herberted. This kid's legit. He's didn't throw for 300 yards for the first time in 3 weeks. If you listen to our quick 5-minute waiver pod, it's a YouTube clip. I put that out on our YouTube site. Yet another reason to subscribe. So in the morning when you're brushing your teeth, you're sitting on the toilet. Let's be honest. 90% of fantasy interactions get done when you're either sitting on the toilet or you're at a red light or you're hiding, sitting in your car in a parking lot, not going home to your kids. That's exactly when all fantasy stuff gets done. Don't tell me I'm wrong, because I'm not. So we got this 5-minute waiver pod. Check it out. It's on YouTube. Just hit the subscribe button. And the second quarterback I had listed was Justin Herbert. Obviously, if you need a quarterback, Big Ben was my first option. Herbert was my second option for the week. But we talked about the running backs, Joshua Kelly, Justin Jackson. We don't have to get back into all that. 60-40 kind of split, you think, going forward, if anybody's new, jumping in an hour into the show?
Yep. Yeah, I think you just hit it. It's about a 60-40. Most, 70%, 65% of the rushing work will go to Kelly, with, really Jackson giving the relief there. And I expect the passing work to be just about evenly split. And that's the area where I think you could see Jackson, pull ahead. That wouldn't necessarily surprise me if he all of a sudden gained the slight edge in the passing down role, especially on kind of routes, working more down the field, doing, not that he's Eckler-esque, but he's more likely to be able to do the things Eckler could do as a receiver than Kelly.
Dude, what happened to Daryl Henderson's season? Malcolm Brown, more carries for more yards, also caught 5 balls for 19 versus Henderson's 1 catch.
I was actually going to ask you because I went and looked, and maybe somebody, if they've heard, they can put it in the chat room and we can watch for it. But I didn't see anything. I couldn't find anything. I couldn't, like I said, I didn't find anything that I could read that said, here's why Darrell Henderson was benched. All I know is he started the game and he played. So for the first, I think he had 11 snaps in the first quarter, and then he only got 11 more of the rest of the game. So it's like they just totally, I don't know if he blew an assignment. I don't know because I haven't got to watch all the film. Like the couple plays I saw him running, I was like, wow, he looks good again. Now they weren't for like huge yardage, but like he's running hard. He looks quick, looks decisive. So I don't know if he maybe blew, a couple of blocking assignments or ran a wrong route that equaled, or he lended himself to a turnover somehow. Maybe it wasn't his fumble, but, he somehow led the team, to a negative play. I haven't been able to go back and watch all of it. So I have no clue, man. I don't know what happened to Darrell Henderson, and I don't know what to think about this backfield other than I'm going to continue to own whatever shares I own.
Yep.
People drop them and I can scoop them, I will, because the one thing we know is that their running game, is pretty good again. So, and they want to run the ball. They run the ball the second most in the whole league. Sean McVay is specifically protecting Jared Goff. He's protecting his offensive line. He's building everything around what? Around play action.
Mm-hmm. All right. I got into it with some guys on Twitter. Actually, a couple or big name guys. So I put out a tweet that said, Mike Gosicki is droppable. This is a guy who people are chasing that big week 2 when he had the 11 target, 8 catch, 130 and a touchdown. Here's Mike Gosicki the last 2 weeks. 3 targets, 1 reception each week. Now, 2 weeks ago, he scored a touchdown. It's the exact same stat line. 3 targets, 1 reception, 15 yards. Miami threw the ball 45 times on Sunday. He saw 3 targets. Now, I'll give you this. I believe he drew a pass interference in the end zone, so that doesn't count, I think, as a target or whatever. But, if I'm looking to score fantasy points, and that's kind of how you win in this game, I can't play a guy who's getting 3 targets and catching 1 pass. I'd rather roll the dice with a Tanyan, with a Mo Alley Cox, like guys who are actually going to get into the end zone. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy on this, Duane, but I'm done with the Gosicki love. I can't do it anymore. I get the big slot and blah, 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 but guy ain't performing. He's Logan Thomas out here. You got every metric in the world except the one that matters to me, and that's scoring fantasy points.
Yeah, I think the problem, and I agree with the Tanyan take, but they're really close, man. Tanyan just plays on a better team with more play action. If you look at, Gosicki, here's the difference. This is the problem. Chan Gailey, who you would think you understand play action. You ran the Georgia Tech offense, for crying out loud, with like Joey Hamilton and Calvin Johnson. Hell, I think even
that team wrecked Syracuse in a bowl
Thomas.
Game one year. It was like 45-0. It was brutal.
But only 10%, of Gosicki's targets are coming on play action. But again, when you look at it as a whole, 71% of the routes, so that's decent, for a tight end. I would put that's in B territory. You'd like it to be over 80, but it's hard to get over 80 as a tight end because you got to do some blocking. His target percentage on the year, 16%. That's really not bad for a tight end. That's pretty good. Like 15 to 20% is strong for a tight end. So the underlying metrics are there. I get what you're saying. He also leads the team in targets in the end zone. He owns 40% of those. He's 40% of their end zone targets on the season. So for me, if somebody wants to drop Gosicki, I'm picking him up in a heartbeat. I get it. He struggled. The guy that's a real turd right now at tight end is Tyler Higby. And the reason Tyler Higby is a real turd is because he's barely running a route on 50% of plays. You're on a team that wants to run the ball all the time, meaning you have a low pass volume. And oh, by the way, Gerald Everett is creeping up in routes every week. So Tyler Higby is a complete shit show. Gosicki, at least, I know he's going to get, his targets. Now, whether or not he turns those into something or whether he, ends up, like you said, I think that's a good example. Logan Thomas is what you're dealing with. But I think Gosicki is still, he's a talented guy. It's a team that's going to be in trailing game scripts. I think his weeks are coming.
He's going to have a new quarterback in about 2 weeks too. Two is taking over. The whispers are already there.
And that could honestly help him because Fitzpatrick right now is really, he's doing the Devontae Parker dance, I mean, he is peppering Parker, with targets. But I mean, Gosicki, look, man, here's the way I look at it. 17% of targets, 24% of targets, 15% of targets. Last week he had 7. I mean, it just, that kind of stuff happens. So I think he's still going to be fine. He's not on a great offense, but I think he probably still is in the top 12 range for tight ends. And I think he's going to have some weeks where he's going to be your tight end 1 in all of fantasy. I think it's still going to happen.
I don't have much on the Minnesota Vikings, Duane. Dalvin Cook's ridiculous. Their pace of play is incredibly slow. I think they run the fewest number of plays per game in the league. I don't know anything on the Vikings.
No, other than, the matchups over the next 4 weeks, like they are freaking juicy, dude. Like, so I mean, you're already excited about the Vikings. Well, now if you look at their matchups, Drake, listen to this. So you get the Seahawks, then you
Can't guard anyone.
Falcons, can't guard anyone.
Suck.
You get a bye week, then you get the Packers, you get the Lions. I mean, dude, they're going to be in some shootouts. They're going to have to put the ball in the air, which doesn't matter. Dalvin Cook gets to do everything. Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones are like the same guy. Dalvin Cook just gets to play slightly more, than Aaron Jones. I mean, honestly, they could basically both be Alvin Kamara, like if they played for Sean Payton.
Yeah,
that's how good they are. So, I really, honestly, I consider those 3 guys when I think about, because they're so much more explosive in the passing game than Zeke. Zeke gets tons of work. And it's nothing against Zeke. I love him. Like as far as running backs go, and he still gets you, the PPR points because he catches the balls. But those guys just, they do so much more with the ball in the receiving game once they get it in their hands, and they're just capable of running different routes and, working more vertically down the field. They can all do those things. It's really just this. McCaffrey, right, is in that same vein. I love all 4 of those guys.
Next few teams, I mean, there's not a whole lot going on. We touched on the Patriots already. Damian Harris, 17 for 100, no Cam. Hopefully we get him back. The New Orleans Saints, Duane, Lat Murray looking like that old Mark Ingram role, 14 carries, 64 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Outside of week 2, he's had weekly carries of 15, 12, and 14. Is he flex worthy now?
Yeah, man. Thank God, because all my Derrick Henry guys, I own so much of Derrick Henry, and he had to go to the bench. And like in 2 of those teams, man, there was nothing. And so I just had to jam Murray in the lineup. And I'm sure my opponent's like going, what the 2 touchdowns? I mean, he gave me like 25 points. Yeah, I mean, look, the Saints offense is slowly starting to get its rhythm. Drew Brees is starting to integrate his other weapons. Again, we just talked about this with Brandon Cooks. People were saying the same thing, Drake, about Emmanuel Sanders. What about Emmanuel Sanders? I thought he was really going to help Drew Brees. What's wrong with it? Well, look, when you have no mini camps, you don't get to install all this stuff. Basically, you're working out at a freaking park while everybody's videoing you on their camera, and you're getting, written up by the NFL and you're getting fined. You just hadn't had time, to implement these things. And I think you're now a month in, and these guys have had a month of practice, and it's more the practice, not the games, right? It's the practice, and especially for a guy like Brees, it's repetition. His arm is a noodle. He has to trust you're going to be where you're going to be, and I think you're starting to see that. Traquan also looking good. So I think the Saints offense is starting to pick up steam. It's not all just going to be Alvin Kamara. You're eventually going to get Michael Thomas back, and I think when you get that, that's great for Murray, because the more they can be down inside the 5, and if they're going to run the ball, I think that's just where, he's going to get, some of his work. If you look at it, overall right now, he owns 40, or sorry, he owns, sorry, Drake, sorry. Last week, he got 40% of the snaps inside the 5. On the season, he's been a little bit lower, I believe. Yeah, 23%. Now some of that has been because, the Saints have been trailing in games. So when you put the two things together, it's not so much him not having his role. It's just when the Saints are behind, Kamara is going to be on the field more. So, I don't think he is Mark Ingram worthy, of a couple of years ago. But I think 60 to 70% of that, honestly, he's kind of like a Josh Kelly, before Eckler, went down. Really, they're kind of the same guy, but he's in a better offense than what Kelly's in.
Shout out Latavius Murray, Onondaga Central High School, 20 minutes down the road from my house. Giants offense is terrible. I don't want anything to do with it. I know Freeman's, I guess, coming into his own a little more, but I don't. Everybody sucks.
Just move on. Just use Darius Slayton this weekend in DFS against the Cowboys. He's going to pop at least one.
Here's my notes for the Jets. Everyone sucks except Jamison Crowder.
Yeah, now that Darnold's going to be out, it's like, do you really even want to mess with Crowder for now?
Joe Flacco's elite, or at least that's what I've been told.
Yeah. I own Crowder on probably like 5 or 6 teams, and I did my first run-through, earlier of what I think my lineups are going to look like this weekend. I think he only went in on like 1, and that's despite, having some injury issues, at wide receiver.
How about them first place Philadelphia Eagles? I don't think there's a hotter team in the league, to be honest. Greg Ward didn't go off.
Honestly, again, I will go back to my comment last week or the week before. If you're in a really, really deep league, I'm carrying Jalen Hurts. There's no way. There's freaking no way Carson Wentz is making it through this season. Like,
this line's bad.
He is balls to the wall, and he's just so klutzy looking. Like, nothing looks pretty. Every fall is awkward. Every hit is big. It's just, and I get it. Like, I like Wentz, actually. It's just like when he plays, it's like, God, it's like, I don't know, Drake. It just doesn't look coordinated.
I got into it with another fantasy guy after the game. The guy was like, "Oh, Wentz sucks. Wentz was terrible today," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Did you watch that game? Like, yeah, the defensive line played well. The linebackers are atrocious. The secondaries, whatever. But Carson Wentz won that game. He willed them to victory with nothing around him. So, you can hate on Carson Wentz all you want for the throws that he misses. That win Sunday night was squarely on Carson Wentz's back. I will say this, as an Eagles homer, there's no team I know more about. Zach Ertz gets you nothing after the catch. They're not going to extend him. This is going to be Dallas Goedert's position if he can ever stay healthy. I wouldn't be opposed to trading Miles Sanders. Tell me if I'm crazy here, Duane. These next 2 weeks, he gets the Steelers and the Ravens. That line sucks. There are 0 holes available for him. He's going to do nothing for you on the ground. And you're just hoping he gets some stuff through the air. But, I don't know. Can you live on a feature back that you're praying breaks a long, touchdown pass? I think you might be able to get something for him now, name value alone.
I'm not trading Miles Sanders. Like, he gives me everything I want. Like, when he's in a shitty matchup, he still catches balls. That's what you want. You want a guy that gets all the work so that when he plays the Steelers, he still gives me 12 to 15 points. But
if you can get something really good for him right now, before he goes and his value dips.
Like, it better be really freaking good. His value doesn't dip. Like, that's my problem. If you think his value dips because he plays the Steelers, then you just don't understand anything about fantasy football. Like, his value is still the same. He's not Joe Mixon. He's not James Robinson. He's not, even Josh Jacobs. This guy is on the field all the time, gets targeted in the passing game. He's the centerpiece essentially of their offense. Does he have issues? Yeah. In his game? Yeah, he does. But, we haven't even seen him get going yet. Like, he's going to break more big plays. This offense going to, if there's one thing I can give, Peterson credit for, man, like, he always tapes stuff together. And we saw this down the stretch last year. Miles Sanders was a great running back to own, even though like the whole team was a mash unit. So they've been there. They've done this before. I'm not trading Miles Sanders. Like you better name like you better name like some of the very, very, very top players in fantasy football, because right now for me, he's easily in my top 10 fantasy players to own, period, for the rest of the season.
Here's what bothers me about Sanders. A glute issue sprung up this week, limiting him in practice. That is a direct result to the hamstring injury, and he's had a history of the hamstring injury. So this is still lingering. So I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of pops up again. So just make sure you got Boston Scott if you're a Miles Sanders guy. I don't think we're done seeing him miss games as we go forward.
I mean, if that's what you think, I read the thing on the glute. I didn't read that it was necessarily a compensatory, injury, where they were associated. I mean, it doesn't mean it's not right. I just hadn't read that. I mean, it makes sense to me. If you're really worried about Sanders getting hurt, fine, trade him. But man, you better get something really freaking good back. Like, I mean, really, really, really good.
So if we say Jalen Hurts is going to be the quarterback of this team at some point 4 weeks from now, and they're running just zone read out the ass because that's all they're going to do. Is he going to run into the ground? Is he going to become Superman? And it's like Joe Mixon from last year where they put the ball in his gut 25 times a game. We'll see. Pittsburgh Steelers are coming off.
Here's all I got to say about Miles Sanders. 13% of targets, 18% of targets, 19% of targets, 16% of targets. I mean, that's what you drafted him for. And now he's getting it. So, I mean, the only scenario I can see where you trade the guy away is because you think he's hurt. And again, you better get something really good, in return. I'm okay. Anyone's movable. I never close my mind and just say, no, you can't move someone. It's just got to be the right deal. I try to be really careful with those kind of things, though, because then sometimes we'll have some folks come back to us and be like, hey, I moved Miles Sanders for, DJ Moore. And we like DJ Moore, but don't trade Miles Sanders for DJ Moore. Like, that's not, so I try to be really careful with that kind of stuff, because you and I both had that where those people reach out, and then I got to let them down slowly and be like, hey man, I really wouldn't have done that. So let's talk about how we can get you back on track here. So you just be careful with it. If you think you can come away with two players that really help your roster, and maybe they're not both elite, but they're both really good, great. You can come away with, a top-notch number one receiver and a low-end number two running back kind of thing. And you're worried about Sanders' injuries and the Eagles, just their team falling apart. I'm okay with that. Just don't give him away.
Jalen Reagor may have been dropped. This team's going to improve in the next, let's say, month. You're going to get Reagor back, Deshaun Jackson back, Alshon Jeffrey back. Alshon Jeffrey, if anything, is going to help the run game because he's a very good blocking wide receiver. This week, the Eagles play the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're coming off this COVID bye. And here's the player you want to get off your waiver wire this week. It's Eric Ebron. Go ask Logan Thomas, Tyler Higby, and George Kittle what you can do against these subpar linebackers. That's being generous. Subpar linebackers for the Philadelphia Eagles. Ebron is going to go for $140 and 2 touchdowns on these clowns. But, you're going to get Deontay Johnson back, Juju, you got Connor and everybody back there. We talked about McFarland if he's hanging out. So, the Steelers kind of all systems go. I anticipate them, running the Eagles out of the building, to be honest.
Yeah, man. I like the Ebron call, 1 to 5% bid if you really need a tight end. Hopefully you can just squeeze him off the wire for 1 or 2%. Especially in shallow to medium-sized leagues. I like the matchup call. It could still be I think you kind of just mentioned it there. It could still be watered down because they do have other guys they like to get involved. But Ebron has been from a utilization perspective, he's right there. And he's going to eventually see his 15 to 20% target share games, and he's gonna be okay. At tight end, I have Tanyan at the top. I've got Hooper, who's been dropped on several teams, next.
Really?
Again, back to efficiency. It's like I'd have him at 10% or so. I got Ebron at 5%, and then Cameron Brate, at 1%. I got Gronk at 5 to 15%. If you really need a tight end.
San Francisco somehow lost to the Eagles. They're banged up as hell too. They really need Garoppolo to come back. We saw my man Beathard got in the game.
Yeah.
CJ Beathard came in. On the waiver wire, Brandon Ayuk, if he's out there, looked
Debo.
pretty good with the ball in his hands. Holy smokes, that rush of 38 yards and a touchdown jumping over guys. Electric isn't even the word. Kittle's back. Debo's back. We get Jimmy G back. This team starts rocking and rolling, can get back into form. Seahawks. Here's my notes, Duane. Start them all.
Yeah, hopefully you don't need us to tell you that.
Yeah. Tampa
You
Bay.
start them all every week, and then you start
Yeah.
everyone that's playing them every week. And that's just how you roll.
Tampa Bay, Tom Brady. What a comeback, man. I didn't think they had it in them. Everybody's hurt. You got Godwin's going to be down a few weeks. You got Fournette. Who knows if he comes back? They play Thursday night, by the way. Evans is nursing an ankle injury. McCoy went down. Kenyon Barner, who even knew he was alive, he went down in the game. Scotty Miller goes 5 for 83 and a touch. And our boy, Keyshawn Vaughn, he's alive too. Holy crap. He came in the fourth quarter. He caught a couple of balls and scored a touchdown in the deepest of deep leagues. Or maybe, if you're playing in some kind of showdown on Thursday and you want to throw Keyshawn Vaughn in there, who knows? But, yeah, man, what's going on in Tampa Bay? I mean, they're going to call me and you to come play receiver in a minute.
Oh God, I watch players get hit now. Like when I was young, I didn't think about it. But I don't know about you, but like as I get older, I watch like just the things that were like when people get landed on and they're on the ground or they get bent a certain way. I'm like, that wasn't even a hard hit. I would die. I would literally die. I wouldn't get up. And plus now we see because of social media really how ripped these guys are under their pads. Whenever they send out these pics and you're like, wow, these guys.
Yeah, Duane and I keep our shirts on during the show. We at least try to leave something to the imagination.
We don't want to embarrass everybody, mostly like ourselves, but yeah. So I think Vaughn, if you're in a super deep league, I got no problems with. It sounds like Fournette will be a game time decision. Sounds like McCoy will be out. So it's not a guy to go drop a lot of money on because I don't see his role really being there in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But last week, they had to get him involved, because like you said, everybody else was gone. So he could be one of the two backs. And we know that Brady, if he needs to, he can work a passing game through his backs, which if you got Evans out, you got Godwin out, you got O.J. Howard gone for the season, and then you just got Scotty Miller and you got Watson. Those are all, any one of those guys could come through, from a standpoint of if you're in a super deep league and you're just trying to, squeak by. The thing I would say with Gronk, he had 69% of his routes. He ran a route on 69% of dropbacks last week. So, that was his highest of the season. Just he shouldn't be on wires, so you want to carry him. If he's out there, just don't go spend a ton of money on him because I'm just concerned, man, that it's still going to be. I feel like Cameron Brate is going to come in and kind of do the same thing as what Howard was doing. But we'll see. Gronk has slowly been. He is a guy I will say his trend has slowly been inching up as far as his routes, getting a little bit more involved in the game. Who knows? Maybe he was playing himself back into shape. But I'll tell you what, if Gronk can't do it this week, Drake. With basically the whole world hurt, it's over. Just we can move on. Like if he can't, basically, just take control of at least one game and say, hey, throw me 7 balls, let me catch 5 for 80 and a T. Like I don't know when it can ever happen if he can't do it this game.
Yeah, Titans are maybe back. I don't know. Half the teams got COVID-19, but maybe a military helicopter picked him up and flew him to Camp David. They're all going to be magically well in 2 days. They got Buffalo this week. We'll see. Who knows? How about that Washington football team, though? Antonio Gibson coming into his own. 13 rushes, 46 yards, and a goal line score. There it is. That's what we're looking for. 4 catches for 82. Gets the Rams this week. Duane, can their awful team and quarterback play keep this guy viable, though, for fantasy?
Well, still really what he needs is just the consistent work because it's still a freaking shit show. His work hasn't changed. He's putting up points despite the fact that they continue to really not get him involved, as much as, we thought they may want to. Here is snaps, 26%, 65%, 39%, 44%. Here is routes, 22, 51, 33, 28. Here is targets.
6,
8, 12. Exactly. Here rushing attempts, 26, 57, 41, 62. So we just don't know like where it's like all over the place. We can clearly watch whenever he's on the screen and we're like, yeah, he's way better than the other two guys. But again, they're trying to work him into this. There's certain situations they just don't want him out there for. If you look at him in the 2-minute work, on the season, only 25%. You look at him on 3rd down, 4th down, and 7+ yards to go, only 4%. So they definitely don't want him out there in those situations inside the 5. He has started, to your point, pick up some steam there. He now has 5 attempts inside the 5. That's 31% of the team attempts. Now, if they're ahead by chance, those still go to Peyton Barber. I get it. That's dumb. But if they're trailing and basically Barber's out of the mix, then he gets the carries inside the 5. So again, it's like just a real dicey situation. It all depends on how much they're winning by, how much they're leading by, what's the situation. I mean, it's so many layers to it. It's honestly hard to predict in any way, shape, or form, what Gibson's going to be able to do. I think you hit the main positive, though, is like he definitely looks the best of these players. He also looks like he's literally the next best playmaker outside of McLaurin. And so eventually you think that this has to turn and they just got to go with this guy. For now, it's hard to get him in your lineups, but he shouldn't be on a wire anywhere.
All right, we went through all 32 teams. We're going to hit Duane with some rapid-fire questions here quickly. All right, Duane, would you play Graham, Ebron, or Gronk over Higby this week?
Graham, Ebron, or who?
Gronk over Higby.
I have to look. Wait, so who's Graham playing? Sorry, I gotta hang on. To answer these questions, let me first prepare myself. Let me pull up the schedule grid.
Bears.
Yeah. Okay. So Graham is playing against the Bucks, and then you've got obviously then Gronk's playing.
Ebron's got the Eagles. I can tell you the answer right now.
Yeah. So I'm probably going with Higby still here. And the reason why is just because I know he still at least gets play action passes. And so I'm going to try to ride that, one more week and hope I get a touchdown out of it. I just don't trust any of these other guys enough yet. But I would say if I had to pick, I would be similar to you, Drake. First, I would go to Gronk just because everybody's out. Like if this is the week, this is it. So if I'm going to bench Higby, it would be Gronk, and then Ebron, would be next.
This guy loves slot right here. Edelman or Crowder this week?
Edelman. I just Crowder, man. I don't know who the quarterbacks. If it's going to be. It sounds like it will be Flacco. I don't like it. I still prefer Edelman. And I know we've got quarterback issues. With the Patriots. Man, I would try to find something different. I don't want to play either one of those guys.
Aaron Jones is on bye. Start D'Ernest Johnson versus the Colts or Damian Harris versus the Broncos?
Harris. Easy. This is if Harris is going to have a week, let's just go ahead and make a bold call. This is Damian Harris's week for the season. Like this is it.
Ooh.
Like he's going to put up his 100 yards. He's going to get his 1 or 2 touchdowns. People are going to go freaking bananas over this guy. Everybody listening to this show is going to trade him. And then you're all just going to sit back when Cam Newton comes back and they still got 5 other running backs involved. And you're just going to do your hands like this. And you're just going to like do the fist pumps because you got something really good out of this dude after you had this week. But for this week, absolutely, he's easily the start.
Someone named Mr. Freeze follows us. I appreciate that. Mike Davis and Terry McLaurin for Chris Carson. He lost Nick Chubb. He's got Deontay Johnson on the bench. So Mike Davis and Terry McLaurin for Chris Carson.
I mean, I'm fine with it. I don't really like it. Like Chris Carson's, his, performance feels really shaky, Drake, to me. Mm-hmm. Like when I look at it, it's like he's had 2 okay weeks and then kind of 2 not really good weeks. So if you look at him from a standpoint, of how much time he's sharing with other backs, it's far more than he's ever done before. We could potentially even see Rashad Penny come back and get involved. It could be a 3-back backfield. So I'm okay with making the move for Carson. Just realize that you may not be done, making moves. And that's what just makes it tougher, right? Because right now, I prefer Mike Davis over Chris Carson, like easy right now. So if I could get 2 more weeks out of that, and then Terry McLaurin, I mean, it's like a guy that's hurt playing against the Ravens with a super crappy quarterback still puts up, what he did last week. I mean, it's hard to be down, on McLaurin. So I know I'm not doing a really good job of answering this, but actually I would say no. I would try to make a different move. I feel like if you own Chris Carson, you're selling high right now. If you're buying Chris Carson, you're buying high. I think you're putting yourself in a situation where, love that offense, but is Chris Carson really going to continue to catch all these balls and score, touchdowns the way he's doing? I'm a little iffy on it.
All right, we'll give you there's 1 or 2 more here. Start Marquise Brown or Tyler Boyd this week.
Marquise Brown is playing against the Bengals, so they're playing each other. I like Boyd. I mean, I think Boyd has just shown us. I mean, he's a central part of the passing game. I like Hollywood. He could easily outscore Boyd. You're like, it's the two opposites, right?
Yeah.
It's the guy that's going to get 8 to 10 targets and pretty much just lock it in. Not on a great offense, but an offense has gotten better. Or you can take the guy that may only, see 3 or 4 targets, but 2 of them could go for touchdowns. I always, unless the matchup's really bad, I typically lean towards the guy that I think is going to see 8 to 10 targets and might be able to squeeze out a touchdown as well. He's going to get the better matchup, from a standpoint of, what Higgins and we'll see if AJ Green is ready to go, but they're going to face tougher coverage outside. So I like Boyd.
Last one, Duane. All right, this guy's looking to trade for McCaffrey. Is Mark Andrews, Juju, and Mostert giving up too much for CMC? Ooh, 3 for 1 there.
I mean, it all depends on your roster, and what you've got. We never know this, right? I mean, you could be in an 8-man league where there's tons of stuff on the wire, your team's loaded, or you're in a 14-teamer. And it becomes very different, because there's nothing else left to replace those guys with. Your bench is probably crap. So there's 2 different answers, to this question. So it's kind of like you need the context. But I would say it was Juju, Mark Andrews, and then and Mostert for CMC.
That seems like a lot to me.
It does seem like a lot. I'd probably want to wait, 1 more week if I can and still use my guys. Mm-hmm. But after that, if I think CMC is getting close, to being back, and I get 1 more week to watch we know who Andrews is, we know who he is. Juju, we're still kind of trying to figure out, like, is he the 2? Is he the 3? Or does he still have a chance to be the 1? So I would say I wouldn't want to do it this week, but if I could do it quickly the week after when I have 1 more data point, and if we still feel the same way about all those guys, then I would go ahead and do it.
If you missed anything, folks, go to the YouTube page. Of course, hit that subscribe button, and you can fast forward through the show. Check out any of our stuff. Waivers at the top. Every team by team, it's in alphabetical order. So just kind of jump around and see where we are, and you can get info right there. Go to establishtheRun.com and PFF.com. Read Duane's utilization report. So many of you out there are already doing so. And we really appreciate it. And I know Duane does especially. Go over to fightingchancefantasy.com. There's so much good content being pumped out there. That's a free site. You can get rankings, ad drops, my Drake's Takes column I do every weekend, players to trade, gambling, DFS, go crazy. So for Dwain McFarland, I am Brian Drake. This has been the Fantasy Football Hustle for Week 5. Folks, we'll see you back here next week. We appreciate it. And remember, friends, never get out hustled.